You're listening to the Divorce and Your Money Show, the #1 divorce podcast in the United States. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and certified divorce financial analyst. Be sure to get a copy of my new book called, surprise, surprise, Divorce and Your Money, How to Avoid Costly Divorce Mistakes. You can get a copy on Amazon or by visiting divorceandyourmoney.com. While you're on the website, be sure to book a strategy session with me. We have 30-minute strategy sessions, and you have two options. One in which where you can just speak directly about issues that apply to you, regardless of whether you're at the beginning of the divorce, thinking about what you want to do, in the middle, trying to figure out the right path to take, or at the end of your divorce and you're trying to figure out the best options for you. And also there we have a document review appointment where we can review your financial affidavit, your divorce settlement, or other documents related to your divorce, and also include a strategy session on top of that to make sure that whatever you're preparing or about to sign is in your best interest. With that, on to this week's episode. Almost half the people I talk to in a given day or week have yet to file for divorce, and they are in the planning phases and are trying to figure out their options. Now, I'm never an advocate for divorce, but there's one situation in which I encourage people to file sooner over later. And the reason is because when you file for divorce, you generally have additional protections when it comes to financial decisions that are made. And specifically is most divorce filings include something that's called a temporary restraining order or automatic temporary restraining order, depending upon your state. And what that means is that neither spouse is allowed to make big financial decisions once the divorce is filed. And the reason that's important is oftentimes I hear people saying, well, my spouse is thinking about doing this. Should I go along with it? Or how can I stop this from happening? Or how do I protect myself if my spouse does that? And oftentimes the only answer is, if this is something you're really worried about, you need to file for divorce now to protect yourself and to prevent your spouse from making this particular financial decision that could be very harmful to your future, particularly when divorce is on the horizon. And this temporary restraining order, automatic temporary restraining order, as I said, prevents your spouse, and you as well, but your spouse from making big financial moves. And what are those? Those could be something like selling property, transferring property, borrowing, like taking on a big debt, changing your insurance policies, withdrawing large sums of money from bank accounts, destroying or hiding assets, paying down big debts, taking on big debts, making a big purchase, things like that. And the restraining order, which you get when you file, is there to protect you and to keep your spouse from doing those things. Now, it gets a little complicated because there's two things that are really important notes to think about. The first is that you can still do stuff that's in the normal course of business. I had a really challenging case lately where the spouses were business owners and they were filing for divorce and they were trying to figure out how to still continue. They had a very, very successful business, but they buy and sell, I'm just going to use the word property very generally, regularly. I mean, that was basically what the nature of their business is. They buy and sell lots of properties. And so the question was, under this temporary restraining order, how do we keep running the business the way we need to run the business, given that basically all they do is large transactions, and how to make that work efficiently? But other times I hear people saying, my spouse is about to withdraw a bunch of money or transfer a bunch of money to here or there, and that's when the restraining order comes into play. But the point of all of that is just to say, is the restraining order, first important note, is that you're still allowed to pay your groceries, pay your bills, pay your mortgage, do the normal things that you do to run a normal life. It's not meant to stop spending completely because that would be unrealistic. The second thing that you should know is that it's not perfect. And what I say by it's not perfect is just because you have this restraining order in effect doesn't mean that your bank knows, doesn't mean your credit card company knows, doesn't mean that all of the institutions know what's going on. So even though there may be this restraining order in effect, if your bank doesn't know, your spouse could theoretically make some big transfers to different places. And yeah, that'll come up later in the discussion, but it is not something that automatically goes in place to every institution that you work with. And so it's something that you need to be aware of, and you need to communicate these things with all of your various service providers to make sure that they follow through with what's in the instructions. Now, of course, there can be consequences down the line if your spouse violates this restraining order, this temporary restraining order. However, the issue is that you have to deal with that later, meaning it could take a month or two or several months to get back what has been taken even after that restraining order. And I'll give you a scenario that comes up almost every week or two that someone calls me about is they say, hey, my spouse is from a foreign country. It doesn't really matter which country, but another country. How do I protect myself? And the big issue is that spouse could, at any moment really, they could, before the divorce is filed, they could just say, well, I'm just going to wire all of my money to this country and then I'm going to move there. And what are you going to do? Well, that's a real possibility. And while you're married and there's no divorce action that's been filed, that's a theoretical possibility and a real one. But in those types of cases, I'll always say, like, look, your best hope is to file, or oftentimes your best hope is to file and then also send this order directly to your bank the same day to prevent a big wire transfer from going out that you don't sign off on and the money disappearing and your spouse disappearing and you're out of luck. So there's something to think about. Another scenario that comes up all the time is you know that divorce may be on the horizon in a year or two. It may not be immediate, but as I said, about half the people I talk to, some are close to filing, but some are several years off. And a common question is, hey, we're thinking about refinancing the house. And I'll say, well, where's the money going to go? Are you going to take money out? Where's that money going to go? Is this going to be a smart decision? And I'll walk through a bunch of questions for the individual person, but I'll say, hey, if you're taking out $100,000 or $300,000 as part of the refinance, is that going to be a smart move for you? And is that really what you want, particularly if you get divorced a year from now or 2 years from now? Is that going to hurt you financially? And how do we stop your spouse from doing this? Now, another thing just to note as I talk about these temporary restraining orders is if you file for divorce because you want one of these in place, it doesn't mean that you have to rush the divorce process. Most of the time, you can file just to have this in place and then work very, very slowly on the other stuff because you just aren't right from a timing perspective. But in terms of protecting your funds and protecting your money, if you're in a disadvantageous position and you don't want something to happen, or if your spouse is about to, go back to school and take on a big student loan, you don't want that to be marital property or that could be something else, or just take out a big debt. There's lots of different scenarios in which this could come into play. And so I want to make sure you're aware of the importance of a temporary restraining order. It's almost in every divorce situation, but you need to think about it, know your state's rules, do your research, and it may be a very useful tool for you as you figure out the appropriate timing for filing for divorce, and it may be a good way, a useful way to protect yourself going forward. Now, before you go, I want to make sure you get some really important information. I'm going to tell you about a few things that may be of interest to you. First, as a favor, is if you could leave a review. If you're on the iTunes store, leave a review on iTunes, or if you search Divorce and Your Money on a website called Trustpilot or on Google, you can leave a review there. It's quick, it's anonymous, it only takes a few seconds, and I really, really appreciate your feedback. I have lots of reviews on iTunes and on Trustpilot, and I appreciate hearing your stories. Also, on divorceandyourmoney.com, you can get lots of great information. Of course, you can book a 30-minute strategy session directly with me. There's two types of strategy calls you can book. Just a normal strategy session, which we discuss the questions that are most pressing to you, regardless of where you are in the divorce process, be at the beginning, towards the end, or in the middle. Doesn't really matter. There's lots of great information we can cover during that strategy call. And also, we have a document review call. It's been one of the biggest things that we've done over the past year, which is you can send me your documents, be it your financial affidavit, a settlement agreement, or other documents that you would like for me to review. And then I review those in advance of the call. And then we get to discuss them in depth as part of a strategy session and get specific answers to some of the specific documents and things that you are considering. Also, for those who need ongoing support, we do have a few options for ongoing support, but regardless, it all starts with a coaching call that you can book at divorceandyourmoney.com. Don't forget to also get a copy of my new book. It's called Divorce and Your Money: How to Avoid Costly Divorce Mistakes. It's available on my website or also on Amazon. You just look me up and make sure you get the new edition. It is filled with excellent information regarding the divorce process, and I know that you will find it helpful. And once you've read the book, be sure to leave a review. That really helps me. I appreciate your feedback, and it also helps other people as they try and find this information. And finally, last but not least by any means, is on the store at divorceandyourmoney.com. If you click on the store button, you can get access to the full archive of podcast episodes. There's over 200 episodes, and what's great about the store link is that the episodes are organized in neat buckets. And they're organized by topic, so it's very easy to follow along with the information. And it is easy to pick out the key topics that matter most to you. And you can get all of those podcast episodes in the store. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Take care.